everybody, welcome back. This is chapter 7, and I'm going to tell you right now, this is one of the most important chapters for passing the North Carolina real estate exam. And honestly, it can be one of the most confusing as well. But don't worry, today we're going to break it down in a way that actually makes sense. So here's a quick overview of what we're covering in this video. What agency really means, the difference between a client and a customer, the type of agency relationships, your fiduciary duties, we're going to use the acronym OLD CAR, dual agency traps, and the big idea, what team are you on? Make sure you follow along with the notes that's provided for you in the link description video below. Just click on that link, print it out, and follow along with this video. That will help this information stick. Let's jump in. What is agency? It's very simple. Agency is acting on the behalf of another person. Agency is a fiduciary relationship. That means you build it on trust. You must act in your client's best interest above your own. And know this, you are not just helping someone, you are legally representing them. So, let's have a big mindset here. This is where most students kind of struggle a little bit. So I want you to think about this a little bit differently. Think of real estate as a team sport. Before you answer any question on the exam, ask yourself, what team am I on? Am I on the buyer team or the seller team? Am I on them both or neither? Because here the truth is, what's good for the buyer is bad for the seller. Buyer wants the lowest price. The seller wants the highest price. So understanding whose side you're on is very important. You cannot answer questions correctly until you know who you represent. So the person you're speaking with, are they a client or are they a customer? A client is someone that you represent. You owe them loyalty, confidentiality, and full fiduciary duties. A customer is someone you work with. You owe them honesty, fairness, disclosure of material fact. So a quick memory tip here, client you work for. A customer is someone that you work with, which now leads us in the different types of agencies. You'll see this on a test. There is a universal agent. That is someone who has unlimited power, can do anything for the client, and it's very rare. Think of it something like a power of attorney. There is a general agent. That is broad authority, ongoing task. An example of this would be a property manager. Then there's a special agent. That is what I am, and that's what you will be when you pass the exam. You'll have limited authority, you have specific task, and you help someone buy or sell real estate. That's special agent. So remember, most real estate brokers in North Carolina, they are special agents. So how is agency created? In North Carolina, agency requires mutual consent and agreement. Payment doesn't always create agency. Let me say that again. You can get paid by someone else that you do not represent. So let's talk about express versus implied. Express versus implied. Express, that's clearly agreed, written, it's in writing. Express, both parties agree. This means both parties know and agree that agency exists. How does that happen? It is written. You use forms like the listing agreement when you're selling a house, or buyer agency agreement when you're helping buyers to purchase a house. A buyer signs a buyer agency agreement with you. The seller signs a listing agreement with you. There's no guessing, no confusing. You are officially their agent. Let's talk about implied agency. Your actions suggest agency. This happens when behavior makes it look like you're acting as someone's agent, even if nothing was clearly agreed upon. Here's how that happens. You start advertising like you're their agent. You give opinions based upon their interests. You act like you represent them. A real life example of this could be that you show them 10 homes. You give negotiating advice. You talk strategy, but there's no signed agreement. It looks like you're their agent. That's implied agency. And so something to understand that's important for North Carolina exam is that implied agency is basically not allowed in North Carolina. Showing property does not create agency. Getting paid does not create agency. You must have an agreement in place, especially before making offers. So here's a quick memory tip. Express, we said it. We expressed our relationship in writing. Implied, it just looks like it. Nothing was signed. Let's move on and talk about fiduciary duties. Fiduciary duties. Use the acronym OLD-CAR. OLD-CAR. That is a great acronym to understand what fiduciary duties are to your client. O for the OLD-CAR is obedience. Obedience. L is loyalty. D is disclosure. C is confidentiality. A is accounting. And R, reasonable skill and care. So let's break that down. Obedience is you follow lawful directions from your client. Loyalty, you put client first above your own interest. Disclosure, share material facts. Confidentiality, protect the client's information. Accounting, you track the money in the transaction. Skill and care, don't be negligent. Remember, when we talked a little bit earlier, you owe OLD-CAR to your client, not a customer, but you still owe honesty, fairness, and disclosure of material fact to a customer, even though you do not have an agency relationship with them. Talking about agency relationship, there is a disclosure that we give to people who we're talking to about forming an agency relationship. That is called Working with Real Estate Agents brochure or form. You may hear it called WWREA. You must give this to them at first substantial contact. What is first substantial contact? That's when someone starts sharing financial information about themselves, their motivation on moving, and their needs and wants. As soon as they start talking real estate, you stop and then give them disclosure. So what is the Working with Real Estate Agent brochure? It is a required disclosure statement in North Carolina that explains who the agent is representing, the different types of agencies that's available in North Carolina, and then the customer chooses what type of agency works best for them. So if the customer tells you how agency works before they start working with you, you're letting them know what you're doing. How are you going to represent them? Are you going to be a buyer agent? Are you going to be a listing agent? Are you going to be a designated dual agent? You have that conversation with them, and the WWREA leads in that conversation. So let's talk about the different types of representation. There is single agency, one side only. There's a buyer side, and then there's a seller side. You may be a buyer agent representing a buyer in the transaction. You're a single agent. You may be a listing agent representing a seller in the transaction. You will be the seller's agent. Let's talk about dual agency here. That's one agent representing both the buyer and the seller. That requires written consent. The big problem with this is you cannot fully represent both sides. You lose negotiating powers. And so some of the pitfall of dual agency is dual agency, one agent representing both the buyer and the seller in the same transaction. Sounds efficient, but the problem is you lose full loyalty. You were supposed to get the highest price for the seller and the buyer the lowest price, but you can't do that. In reality, you're no longer an advocate. You become a neutral middle person. You have limited negotiation. In dual agency, you cannot suggest pricing strategy. You cannot advise on a negotiation tactic, and you cannot push one side over the other. Also, confidentiality gets kind of tricky. You must not share the seller's bottom line. You must not share the buyer's max price. And so the problem is you know both sides' secrets, but you cannot use them. It could also be a conflict of interest. This is the big one. One agent, two clients, opposite goals. You try to serve two masters by pulling in the opposite direction. Dual agency sounds good at first, one agent handling everything, but the reality is you lose the ability to truly represent either side. You're not fighting for your client anymore. You're just managing the transaction. Now, there is a type of dual agency that works, and that's called designated dual agency. That's the same firm, but two different agents. That's a better separation there. So designated dual agent, why it's better, is the real advantage is this. Both representations happen with the buyer and the seller. So one agent stuck in the middle, that's dual. The designated dual agent is that the buyer gets an agent and the seller gets an agent, and they're with the same firm. Each client gets their own agent. They have someone fighting for them for the lowest price for the buyer, and the seller has someone fighting for that higher price. It feels more like true representation again. Also, confidentiality is protected. Each agent must keep their client's information private. So the buyer's motivation stays with the buyer's agent, and the seller's bottom line stays with the listing agent. This also allows for negotiation. Agents can't fully negotiate under dual agency, but with designated agent, each agent can negotiate for their client, with their client. And so dual agency, remember this, dual agency equals limited advocacy, live-in advocacy. Now, let's move on a little bit to material facts. The definition of a material fact is that anything that affects value or desirability and anything you know or you should have known. Should have known equals liability. That means even if you didn't actually know, it is reasonable that an agent should have known. You can still have responsibility. This is where agents get in trouble a lot of times. This is one of the biggest discipline issues in real estate. Agents think, I don't know, so I'm fine. Wrong answer. It's what a competent agent should have known. It's not what you don't know, it's what you should have known. And why this happens in real life, agents get in trouble because they don't investigate enough. They ignore red flags. They rely only on what the seller tells them, or they just try to protect the deal and keep the deal from falling apart. So here is some real world examples. Material facts. The roof leaks, foundation cracks, flooding history, zoning changes, nearby highway project. Let's look at this scenario here. You notice water stains on the ceiling. You may say, seller, don't mention anything. That's not enough. You have a duty to investigate and disclose. Not saying anything is still something in real estate. Now, there are things that are not a material fact. You do not have to disclose a death in the home. You do not have to disclose if the house is haunted or sexual offenders nearby. Material facts are where agents think they are protecting the deal, but that's exactly where they lose their license. So let's move on to misrepresentation. And there are 4 types of misrepresentation. There is willful misrepresentation, there's neglect misrepresentation, there is willful omission, and then there's negligent omission. Let's talk about willful misrepresentation. You know it's false, and you say it anyway. An example would be, you know the roof leaks. The buyer asks, any issues with the roof? You say, nope. The roof is fine. It's in great shape. You lied on purpose. Negligent misrepresentation. Negligent misrepresentation. You say that's false, but you thought it was true. So, example, seller tells you the HVAC system is 2 years old. You repeat to the buyer, yeah, the HVAC is about 2 years old, but in reality, it's 12 years old. You didn't verify, and you passed along bad information. Willful misrotation. You know something's important, and you intentionally leave it out. So, for example, you know the basement floods every heavy rain. Buyer never asks. You say nothing. You purposely kept it hidden. Now, let's talk about negligent omission. You don't know, but you should have known. An example of this, HOA rental restrictions. You list a home in a neighborhood with an HOA. You never review the HOA documents. You never verify the restrictions. Buyer asks, can I rent this property out? You say, I don't see why not. Later, HOA rule says no rentals allowed. You didn't know, but you should have checked. You should have checked. So easy way to remember these 4 is willful, you knew. Negligent, you should have known. Misrepresentation said something was wrong. Omission is left out. And I would say the worst one of this would be willful misrepresentation, because you lied. You lied. Let's talk about caveat emptor. Caveat emptor means buyer beware. It's a legal concept that means the buyer is responsible for discovering defects before purchasing it. You buy it, you own it, the problem's all yours. And so in a transaction, between just a buyer and a seller, the law says it is the buyer's job to investigate the property. That means the buyer should get inspections, review documents, ask questions, and do their due diligence. Caveat emptor does not mean the seller can lie either. And it definitely does not protect the agent to protect us, because we still have to disclose material facts if we know about the material facts. So once you're licensed, you must disclose material facts, even if you represent the seller, and even if it does affect the client. Why? Because the law draws a line. You fight for your client until it hits the law. You fight for your client until it hits the law. Let's talk about termination of agency. Agency ends when the transaction is complete. This is the best for it, the best way for it to end. You got the contract expires, did not renew the agency agreement. You have mutual agreement. Both the agent and the client agree to move in separate directions. You have death of a client. There's no one to represent. Property is destroyed. There is nothing to sell or buy. So let's wrap this up. Big takeaways here. Agency equals fiduciary relationship. And then always ask, what team am I on? The buyer side or the seller side? Understand and know the difference between a client and a customer, because that matters. Know the acronym OLD CAR, because that spells out your duties. Dual agency. Remember, you have limited power. Material facts. Disclose what you know and what you should know. If you understand agency, you will pass a lot more questions on this exam. So make sure you spend time understanding agency. Hey, thank you for watching this video. If this was helpful for you, make sure to subscribe in the link below, and follow me on Facebook for more real estate exam prep and training. And as always, if you have questions, feel free to reach out to me. You can email me or give me a phone call. I am here. I hope I am here for you from licensing to close.